Thank you. I have a bit of an esoteric topic today, but I can't underscore how important it is. So even though it may be a bit boring, just bear in mind that it has pretty broad implications for how shows are conceived, how this interactive content is delivered. So one quick slide on just who we are. So basically, our products are used by many of the largest broadcasters to run their second screen apps. These are largely network apps now. There's a bit of a trend, at least in the States. I'm based in Los Angeles, where it's a bit warmer today. And sorry, just on that note, I was here last July on the hottest day of the year, and this might be the coldest day of the year. So I don't know what that says about me, but I don't think I've seen the best of this city yet. So off the weather. So basically, there's been a bit of a trend, right? So over the last couple of years, a lot of the television networks have been dabbling, and you've seen a lot of kind of individual show apps. But the trend generally in the States is that these are migrating into network-wide apps. And those network-wide apps now have things like TV Everywhere, where I can watch the shows. In the States, that's generally handled through authentication, where I have to log in with my cable provider's username and password, and then I can access episodes. But they're starting to enable individual shows, a growing number of individual shows within that app, with this interactive second screen kind of related content that can be consumed as a pure kind of second screen experience, but also can be consumed as a one screen experience on a mobile device. So again, topic is interactive content syndication. Again, very boring and esoteric, but here's sort of what it means. There's a lot of options for the consumer. Is there? That slide's wrong. But anyways, you get the idea. There's a lot of options for the consumer. There's this device that is arguably in the way, right, of myself and the television. And as much as we've talked about and we like to think that the consumers are going to be in the owned and operated apps, the truth is that it's going to be a very fragmented ecosystem. And people are going to be in Twitter, and they're going to be in their cable providers' apps, and they're going to be in your apps, and they're going to be all over the place. And if anybody doesn't agree with that, we should have that conversation, because that's very, very much how we believe this market is going to play out. So that's a problem, right? Because you have all of these categories of applications, and you have each of them delivering sort of different value to the consumer. So my cable operator, it's obvious. I can watch shows, across networks. I can get interactive content. I can do all of these great things. If I'm in the owned and operated app from the show or the network, maybe I get richer content or better content, or I have a deeper community. But in both of those environments, as I said before, commented before, there are things that just simply can't happen, right? And that's why the television networks in large value and promote a platform like Twitter. It's not because they want to, right? You guys know as well as I do that no television network wants to promote a third-party brand. But the value is that I can put up a hashtag, and all of the crazy stuff that gets said on Twitter, I don't have to be responsible for, right? I remember having a conversation when we first started this company with CBS Labor Relations. And it was the weirdest meeting I ever had, because they asked me, they said, okay, so tell me, where does this happen? Where does this interactive content exist? And I said, oh, well, it's on a second screen. They said, oh, thank God. Okay. Please don't put it on the television, because the producers and the Directors Guild, they think they own the TV. So if you put anything else up there, we're going to get phone calls, and this is going to be a big mess, right? So it's interesting to see that that thinking, I think, has evolved and it's emerged. I think there's some challenges that are ahead of us. But the reality is that to the extent that your audience is in your app and they're in other applications, that fragmentation prevents the scale that's necessary to pay for all of this stuff. Now, the CBC, and you're fortunate that you have this media fund in Canada, which we don't have in the States. And that allows you to do really innovative things. And I said this to Paul and to Tessa this morning, but because we work with so many of the large programmers in the States, we have pretty good visibility into sort of what's being done. And CBC is really doing some great things. And I think a lot of that is because maybe you're a little bit less encumbered, and that's a great benefit. So taking that and sort of raising the bar, right, raising the standard, I think that's what's happening. I think that's really important. But if you think about it, at some point in this process, this has to be paid for, right? The value returned to an advertiser has to exist. So how does that exist when you have 10 different applications that people are using? So we would argue that that exists when the content that's being created and delivered, for example, if we take Over the Rainbow, That interactive content, the polling, the rating, the audience engagement, that content should be able to be syndicated into third-party applications. And where last year was really, technically speaking, the year of kind of TV everywhere, where most of the providers, the cable companies, were getting into a position where they could deliver to the consumer what they really know they want today, which is they want to watch the show wherever they can, to now this year layering into that the interactive experiences. But Rogers here or DirecTV in the States or whoever, they're not going to and they can't create that content, but they desperately want to participate in that. And a percentage of your audience is going to be there. So that is a prerequisite for the scale that needs to happen. And that scale, I think, brings with it a number of benefits. But let me talk about sort of where we think the timing is. And this is our crystal ball, right? So take it for what it's worth. But 2012, 2013, still largely about second screen experiences, some syndication out into third-party apps. ZBox in the States is a good example of a third-party app that has some support from the programmers. So again, you could have an interactive experience inside of ZBox as opposed to inside of the Fox app or the NBC app or whatever it might be. Starting this year and going into next year, that's going to change. That's going to sort of morph into broader support from the cable companies, from some of the over-the-top providers, people who have the rights, who've acquired the rights to this content, who want this interactive content because it does what we know and believe and the data says, which is it leads to more engagement. People watch the show longer. They talk about the show more. They do more. Your story is better heard. But it probably isn't going to be until sort of next year or the year after where a lot of this content starts to get pushed back to the primary screen. And the value in sort of this progression is that it just becomes easier for the consumer to enable, right? Like right now, quite frankly, it's still very hard, right? The consumer you have to promote an app. The consumer has to say, oh, there's an app. I don't know what I'm getting, or I know what I'm getting. Let me download it. Let me fire it up. Let me sync to the show. Like, it's a lot of work, right? I mean, television is so popular because it just works. You push a button and there's always something there. The second screen interactive isn't there yet. But as that gets pushed up to the primary screen, it becomes a lot easier to enable, and that's going to change, I think, a lot of things for the better. So to stay on point, how does it make TV better? I think there's a few things that it does. One is it will result in larger connected audiences. And there's a lot of benefits that come from that. But there will simply be more people who are doing this. There's more and better data that will come out of that. So there's been a lot of talk about the value of the conversations that happen on Facebook or on Twitter for show producers to understand what's happening or that may inform, the path of the script coming into the end of the season. You'll have more of that data and it will arguably be better. It paves the way for truly interactive formats. And that's, Paul talked about really no new format since the late 90s with reality television. We absolutely believe, and in any way possible try to support the idea that there will be a breakout show, right? There will be a survivor, if you will, of interactive. And then once that happens, then everything changes, right? There's a bunch of followers in this business, right? So everybody follows, and that becomes the norm. They're still not quite there, but I don't think we're that far off for where a TV show says, hey, the device in your hand or your pocket is required to participate in this program. So we're not quite there yet, but I think we're getting close. And the last thing is personalization. It's funny, when I think about all of the talk about interactive formats and cool ideas for alternate endings and mazes and all of that, that's really cool. And I think there's something to that. I think where it really gets interesting, though, is when, I, as an individual, potentially have a different outcome than you, right? This idea that I'm participating kind of en masse in this, sort of binary decision. I don't know, for some reason it doesn't feel as interesting or as important to me as the thought that what I'm getting is different than what you're getting. And so I think it leads to personalization. The challenges, though, I think are pretty obvious. You have to think about, in this idea of syndicated interactive content, well, how is this experience consumed when it's not within your application? What happens when the television manufacturer enables an interactive layer that has content or graphics that are now, in essence, competing with the graphics that you're running on your broadcast? Like, these are inevitabilities. I mean, there's even talk of television manufacturers layering ads on top of TV, right? So these crazy things are going to happen. I mean, Dish Network in the States allows you to skip commercials without doing anything, right? So the programmers hate their guts, but that's what they're doing. So this is going to continue to happen. So I think it has broad implications for the shows that you guys create.